I've done this presentation a few times, and normally I have some handouts. So just want to talk terminology here real quick. Um, for phosphorus, there's a couple kinds of phosphorus. Uh, Phosphorus is called the limiting element, which means in a lake, the less phosphorus you have, the less growth you're going to get. Um, the nine element plan is based on total phosphorus, which is often called TP. And phosphorus is an element and it recycles in the lake. It doesn't really disappear unless it gets locked into some sediment. If you want to learn more about the history of phosphorus, which is actually quite interesting, you can read the book called The Devil's Element. Uh, Very easy reading and very relatable to what's going on Seneca and all the Finger Lakes. Um, Microcystis is the dominant species that cause the algal blooms on Seneca. This is just some information about microcystis. It's been around for billions of years. It does some really kind of amazing things. Um, but this is something to go back and just take a look at later. You can learn a little bit more about uh, how microcystis works. And then there are 2 pages in here of 90 projects. These come out of the 90 plan. This set here is more tailored towards municipalities. And then there are a whole bunch of projects for landscapes uh, that are also documented in the 90 plan. All right, so what we're going to talk about tonight, everyone is, I'm sure, familiar with HABs, um, potential toxins in our drinking water, can ruin our recreation and tourism. It's hazardous to wildlife, uh, humans, dogs, right? You don't want your dogs to be in the water when it's green. The picture on the upper left is the visitor center on Seneca in 2024, September. 2024 was the worst year we've had for HABs. You could see the algae blooms from images from space in September. So what we're going to talk about is 4 drivers of HABs, warming water, how the wind plays into it. The mussels also are playing a part. And then nutrients, specifically phosphorus. And you're going to hear me say phosphorus quite a bit in this presentation. It's the only factor that's really controllable. Um, and we're going to talk about the sources of phosphorus. They're documented in the 9E plan. And then we're going to talk some about the solutions that the 9E plan has in them. These solutions, many of them are targeted towards farming. And there is state funding available to implement a lot of these solutions.
Mark, the pictures don't appear to be showing.
Not showing.
It's still the 9E HABs and phosphorus slide.
Is that changed?
It still shows on my screen the same.
Shoot. Okay. Hang on.
Okay, we're on rising lake temperatures. I see that.
Okay. For some reason, when I did slideshow, okay.
Okay,
Now it's
sorry.
good.
It appears good now. Sorry,
Okay.
everyone.
So with HABs, Pure Waters has a program. We've been monitoring HABs for 7 years now. We have 82 zones around the lake and about 80% coverage of those zones with volunteers. There's an app that people report when they see a shoreline HAB, take pictures. We aggregate data, send it on to the DEC, who does a statewide database for HABs. And as you can kind of see from the data here, there's no real clear pattern coming out as far as progression of things get worse, get better. Um, the only thing you kind of notice over the 7 years, if you go back to July, the first 4 years we didn't see any HABs in July, and now the last 3 years we have seen HABs. And November was the first year last in 2024 where we saw a HAB in November. So this is related to the lake warming earlier, cooling later. Basically, the HAB season is extending. So one of the factors is a rising lake temperature. This is data from a buoy that sits off of Clark's Point at the north end of the lake. Hobart and William Smith maintains it. And over 30 years, our average temperature in the top 2 meters of water has risen by 10 degrees F. And the blue on the screen here with the growth. So this is how cyanobacteria grows at the different temperatures. So in the wintertime, when the lake's 40 degrees, they're dormant, they're down in the sediment. And then in the spring, as the water starts to warm up, they start coming up the water column. The warmer the water gets, the more growth they can do. And when the water gets really warm, as you can see up to like 86 degrees, that's their optimal growth. Now, we generally don't have water that warm, but like I said, that it's rising every year. So
I,
that's a factor in cyanobacteria's favor.
I don't think we're on the temperature slide. We're still on the uh, cubic water 9. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I'm gonna stay out of slideshow.
Yeah, it
Uh,
may not just be function. This is fine the way it is now.
okay, so
And there,
I'll go back over this real quick then. This is data from Hobart and William Smith. Uh, Top 2 meters of the water, the line's going up. That's the average temperature. It's gone up about 10 degrees F in 30 years. So that's going to lead to more growth, as you can see from the blue scale on the right of the graph. That's how cyanobacteria reacts to warming temperatures. All right, wind speed is another factor. Typically, they form when the wind speeds are low, less than 6 miles an hour. This allows cyanobacteria to float up the surface. It can aggregate and push cyanobacteria to shorelines. Uh, there's more sunlight to deeper depths in the water, which is benefits cyanobacteria. We know that when the wind speeds get great, it breaks the colonies up, pushes cyanobacteria back down, uh, reduces light. The water gets colder, which leads to less growth in the cyanobacteria. Now, some studies recently are showing another kind of side effect of the wind speed, and that's the wave action will start disturbing the shoreline sediments. And the shoreline sediments have phosphorus in them. So there's something called Langmuir circulation that if you've ever looked out at the lake and seen these foam trails, it's mixing the water vertically in the water column. So as the as the waves disturb the sediments on the bottom, these Langmuir circulation kind of moves them up into the top of the water column. Uh, and that's where cyanobacteria are to take advantage of it once again. Invasive mussels. So they've been around since the 90s, the zebra mussels. Since then, there's another mussel called the quagga mussel from the same area, invasive species. Um, they now are 80 to 90% of the mussel population. They can live in deeper water. As they filter the water, they also remove phosphorus from the water and they store it. They excrete phosphorus. So you can kind of see that, once again, mussels are helping the cyanobacteria. They remove plankton from the water column, which is a competitor. They can detect and expel cyanobacteria. So they're changing, they have changed the lake. In the Great Lakes, the mussels make up 90% of the biomass in the lake. So that means 90% of everything living in the lake is a mussel. And they're highly correlated for HABs in these what are considered low nutrient lakes. In Owasco Lake, there was a study a few years ago where the average density of the mussel population was 5,000 per square meter. So that is a lot of mussels. The Great Lakes estimate they have about 750 trillion mussels in the Great Lakes. All right, so those are some of the factors that cause HABs. A 9-element plan is an EPA framework that New York State uses when you have a pollution issue. You do this 9-element plan that identifies the use of the watershed, identifies the sources of the pollution, sets reduction goals, and then outlines projects that you can do to improve water quality. So this was released in 2022. 4 organizations around Seneca and Keuka participated in it. They used a tool, a USGS tool called SWAT, Soil and Water Assessment Tool, to estimate how much phosphorus is coming into the lake. And then it has target reductions for certain areas of the lake. So now we'll look closer at what the 90 plan identifies as the amount of phosphorus coming into the lake. So the sources of phosphorus are wastewater treatment plants, septic systems, and then what they call non-point source phosphorus. So that's phosphorus that you can't, it's coming from a general area. You can't really pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. So the 90 plan says yearly 305,000 pounds of phosphorus are entering Seneca Lake. And of those types, wastewater treatment plants are responsible for about 10%, septic systems about 1%, and the rest of it is coming from farming, forests, viniculture, only 2%, and developed land. So to take a closer look at the wastewater treatment plants, you can pull data from the EPA as these plants have to submit data every month on their output that they're dumping into the lake. And there's 6 wastewater treatment plants on Seneca. They're putting in about 12,000 pounds. which is about half of what the 11% estimate was. So you can see Dundee and Catherine Valley, very low. Those are brand new plants in the last 3 years. Geneva has done some updates, and they're also almost half the population around the lake. So they're doing pretty well. The other three wastewater treatment plants, I think Five Points has money to do upgrades. So the wastewater treatment plants, I guess, are basically in pretty good shape. It's the non-point source phosphorus that is the real problem on the lake. So you can see this waterfall. This is Big Stream down behind Glenora. We're going to talk in more detail about how much phosphorus is coming over that waterfall a little bit later. But Seneca Lake, for the non-point source phosphorus, is estimated at 235,000 pounds. And that's a year. And now I want you to think about, how it exits the lake, right? The only way out is the Seneca River/canal. And approximately 5% of the water every year leaves the lake. And that water is lake water, which our lake has been around 9 or 10 micrograms per liter of phosphorus, probably for 10 years now. So that is leaving through the river. What's coming in at Big Stream is in the order of 5, 6, 7, 800 micrograms per liter. So the majority of the phosphorus that comes in every year is staying in the lake. And it's not in the water column because our numbers haven't been changing. So that means it's in the sediment and the biomass. That those are the phosphorus sinks that every year are sucking up that phosphorus. So the nutrient solutions that get talked about in the 90 plan come in 5 categories. Hydrological resilience, and this is something like reconnecting a floodplain. Actually, the Ian Smith, who's our watershed steward as part of SWIO, is working on a project down in Watkins to divert more water from the diversion canal back into the wetlands down there. And those are great projects, can absorb a lot of phosphorus, and they'll last for decades. The next one is BMPs, they call them, best management practices on working landscapes. So this is our projects aimed at farming. AEM plans are part of this. These were Cornell developed. They've been available for about 30 years now. Farmers can voluntarily enter into an AEM plan, which will have them do a project to do something to reduce phosphorus. Buffers near streams are great absorbers of phosphorus. So there's, I don't know, 20 some different projects that are targeted towards farming. Wastewater management, we talked about. Local laws, we're going to talk about in a minute. And then education and outreach. Just a note that, nutrients are not our only problem on the lake. We have PFAS coming in from the Army Depot. Wastewater treatment plants are putting PFAS in the lake. Pesticides are going in the lake, microplastics. And salt reduction is also something that has been focused on around the watershed to try to reduce the salt being applied. Salt's going to run into the lake It's the most dense thing, so it's going to head to the bottom of the lake. And that can cause some problems. Now, municipalities can impact water quality. Um, Municipalities have the set the priorities, they have the budgets. There are projects that they can be doing to help um, reduce phosphorus. And like I said, those were documented in that first set of charts we took a quick look at. Um, Highway departments can help, right, when they dig out the ditches. It's important to hydroseed afterwards to reduce erosion. That's not always done. Uh, some of the counties have equipment that can be used to do that. So kind of the message here is, water quality is really a shared responsibility across all the municipal functions. So land use regulations, this is out of the 90 plan. A group from Cornell went through all the local laws that the 42 municipalities on the lake have. Um, just looking at the map, you can see Cuca Lake really has stronger regulations around their lake than Seneca Lake does. So there is some room for improvement on the Seneca Lake side. So, okay, so we have HABs. We know phosphorus is being dumped in the lake from multiple sources. The state has, a plan for doing all these projects to help reduce phosphorus. But how do we know that it's really working, right? How do we know progress is being made? Um, there's a couple ways of looking at this. Um, the 90 plans that are done, many of those have phosphorus savings associated with them. But there's a lot going on in the watershed. Something you save by implementing the project in one area could be negated by actions in other areas. The 90 plan, the SWOT model, that allows you to run different scenarios. And one of the scenarios that they ran was kind of the redistribution of rainfall. Climate change doesn't necessarily say we're going to get more rain, but it's going to get redistributed with more coming in the spring and the fall. We've certainly seen that this year. So those increased phosphorus coming into the lake due to the heavy storms, that's going to counteract any savings that we have going on with these 90 projects. So how do we really know if we're putting less phosphorus into the lake? So the 90 plan talks about calculating phosphorus loads as a metric. And we're going to talk about what that is. Pure Waters last year started a stream flow project in conjunction with ESF in Syracuse. And the objective here is to calculate phosphorus loads so we can see how actuals, compare with estimates coming from the SWOT model. And over time, hopefully we would see a reduction as these projects get implemented. So phosphorus loads, so you need two things to do that. You need the volume of water entering the lake, and you need the phosphorus concentration of that water. So what we do, this is how USGS does their gauges. You take a stream, you divide it up into segments. Each segment has an area, depth times width. And then you also measure the velocity of the water. So that's going to give you feet per second. You multiply those three things together and you get cubic feet per second, which is the discharge. So in the graph, all the blue points are points that I measured in the stream across last year and some of this year. You plot those and you add a quadratic equation in Excel, a trend line, they call it. And that now gives you a curve. They call this a flow curve. So now on the curve, at any height of water, you can get the cubic feet of water. And to get the height of the water, we use that black sensor that's in the picture. It's installed in the stream, and based off of water pressure, you can determine what the height of the water is. So now every hour, we know the height of the water, and now we can calculate phosphorus across time. So to just compute 1 point, so in the upper right corner with the square, that was last June down on Big Stream. The discharge was 1,100 cubic feet a second. So you multiply by 3,600 seconds to get discharge by hour, and that's about 4 million cubic feet. And if you multiply by 7.48, you get the number of gallons. So that storm last year in 1 hour put 30 million gallons of water down Big Stream and into the lake. So that's the volume part. So we took a phosphorus sample, and that came back at 770 micrograms per liter from the lab. We use CSI over in Ithaca and also Finger Lakes Institute sometimes to be the lab that process these samples. So now the load is just the volume, the 30 million gallons times the concentration times a conversion factor to get the pounds. And that comes out to 192 pounds of phosphorus entered the lake at Big Stream in 1 hour. So that's how you do the calculations. So now there's some other math to figure this out on an hourly basis, and we'll have another webinar in the future to kind of go into those details. But knowing the phosphorus loads, like I said, is kind of key to understanding if you're getting any better, if the projects that we're implementing are helping. So now, what can you do? There's a lake-friendly living program, which is a statewide kind of thing that Pure Waters participates in. These are basically just tips for reducing your impact on the lake. If you're going to spread phosphorus on your yard, get the zero, I'm sorry, fertilizer on your yard, get the zero phosphorus fertilizer. Don't use pesticides on your yard. If you have a septic system, make sure it's maintained. Those types of things. Lake-friendly farming was a pilot program the town of Geneva did. And this was to encourage farmers to join these AEM plans. There's all kinds of educational information on our website, webinars we've been doing, articles, our water quality symposium. We do have a HAB and lake level text alert system. So in the summertime here, as people start finding HABs, we'll send out a text to people who register to know that they're occurring on the lake that day so you can be aware. You can always join Pure Waters. You don't need to join Pure Waters to get like the text alerts and things like that, but we would like you to. Elected officials, stronger land use regulations. That's something that people can be doing. On Owasco Lake, they have these watershed rules and regulations that come through the Department of Health. They were established back in the 80s. Skinny Atlas has some. I believe Canandaigua has some. Seneca Lake does not have any watershed rules and regulations. Um, they could, uh, but they don't. Um, I'm going to tell you, these are kind of controversial. Owasco has tried to update their rules and regulations. The Department of Health kind of balked at doing that. City of Auburn, Town of Owasco sued the Department of Health. Uh, the first ruling by the judge was in their favor. Um, so they're still hoping to push these new watershed rules and regulations through. And I bring this up just because it's important, I think, to understand what the other Finger Lakes are doing. Uh, One of their rules and regulations that they want to enact are all farms over 7 acres have to have an AEM plan. So once again, today they're voluntary. This in a Wasco watershed would make them mandatory, and that's why this is so controversial, and there's lawsuits going on. The county has water quality meetings. Uh, the soil and water conservation districts who do a lot of these 90 projects put out newsletters where they talk about these projects. Ian Smith, like I said, does projects and helps municipalities work their way through the grant process and uh, things that they need to do to implement some of these projects. He's also the guy doing the Catherine Creek um, project. He's also doing a project in Geneva right now uh, to kind of make an area into a kind of a new park, and it has some water quality features to it. Um, just one thing, our Constitution was amended right a few years ago that says each person has a right to clean air and water and a healthy environment. Um, so HABs, right, are projected to continue to get worse. Um, we have the right to do something about it. Basically, just in general, water quality awareness really needs to be an integral part of our Seneca Lake community. Like I said, we have 42 municipalities. They all need to be thinking about what their part is in water quality. It's not just the lakefront. Um, it goes through the entire watershed. It takes everyone, to join, to come together to make some changes. So that's it. Any questions?
Yes, we have a few. I'll start off with a question from Michael Fitzgerald from the Finger Lakes Times. Do I understand correctly that a big part of the HABs problem is caused by phosphorus that is in the lake already, in the lake bottom sediment, for example? Could we get some more comment? Could we hear more about the phosphorus that's already trapped in the lake?
Yes. There is a lot of phosphorus in the lake, in the sediment. Um, we're often called low phosphorus lakes. Uh, I call us a low phosphorus water column, but a high phosphorus lake. Uh, there's been research done on Skinny Atlas in 2018. The Jefferson Project, which was the RPI IBM consortium that did a lot of work on Lake George as far as putting instrumentation into the lake to understand what's going on. They did the same thing on Skinny Atlas Lake. And in 2018, what they found was when there were waves generated either by the winds or there's an internal wave in lakes called a seiche, that stirred up the sediment. And then, like I said on the one chart, the Langmuir circulation uh, moved the phosphorus up into the water column. And then a calm day, uh, 8 times that those three things happened, and they were able to detect it because they had sensors like Doppler radar sensors to understand where the currents are in the wave action. 8 times that sequence happened, there were 8 HABs. So yes, the phosphoruses in the sediment definitely plays a role in HAB formation. That doesn't mean that that sequence that they detected in Skinny Atlas is the only way that HABs can happen. But it was a good study uh, to show one way that they are occurring. And and like I said, we don't lose very much sediment, or I'm sorry, phosphorus through the canal every year. Less than 5% of what comes in. Um, and it's being stored in the biomass. There's some studies that say the mussels, as they live and die, drive the phosphorus cycle because there's so many mussels in the lake. If there's a large die-off, the phosphorus that they have stored in their bodies, right, their soft parts are going to decay, and that phosphorus is going to get re-released. So there's a lot of chemistry going on for all this to happen. Um, but there have been studies on the Great Lakes that say the mussels are controlling the phosphorus cycle. Not everybody, I think, agrees with that. Like I said, we still have, a lot of phosphorus coming in from the streams, but definitely the sediment is involved.
Great. Speaking of zebra mussels, we have another question from Lynn. I understand that zebra mussels filtered all plankton Bt cyanobacteria and excreted it as a pseudofeces. Is this true? And do quagga mussels have the same aversion to cyanobacteria?
Yeah, I believe the answer is yes for quagga mussels. And yeah, they pseudofeces is an output um, of the mussels. And
Gotcha.
there's phosphorus in that pseudofeces.
Um, from Pam, there is some discussion very recently regarding floating solar panels on bodies of water. Are there studies to predict the impact on HABs and or cause other problems? Did the extreme low water level last fall impact the HAB appearance in November? So kind of a two-parter.
Yeah, as far as floating solar panels, that's something new. I haven't heard of that. Um, but I don't know what to say about that. Is what was the second part of the question?
Did extreme low water level last fall impact HAB appearance in November?
Once again, that's a hard question to answer. Um, when you go back to the factors, uh, low water. Um, I mean, we had the drought last year, so during the summer we didn't have a lot of nutrients coming into the lake. Um, Whereas back in 2024, if you remember, in July we had a big storm from one of the hurricanes that dumped a lot of nutrients into the lake. Uh, kind of later in the year, and that may have contributed. Uh, but as far as the low water level, I don't really know how that would have impacted HAB formation one way or another.
Gotcha. And a bit of a question from myself, actually. I've been going around the watershed talking to local municipalities, local lawmakers, and I've been asked, why is it so complicated to try to predict HABs for a given season, and why is modeling it such a tricky thing?
It's the factors, how things interact, right? Every year, the factors are different, right? Normally, when you're trying to get to the root cause of a problem, you want to get a repeatable situation. Um, like I said, the factors change every year. Uh, 2024, we had low wind, in the September timeframe, and that definitely contributed, to the halves we had then, right? We didn't have any of those high winds to break the halves up, so they just kept going. Um, and you can't predict the wind. I mean, that's why when you go back to that first chart, I mean, the only controllable factor we have is the nutrient runoff, is controlling that. And I mean, and that's a really hard thing. So when you
Mm,
have, 30 million gallons coming down a stream in an hour, and you think about, okay, now what are the projects you need to slow that water down? It's really quite daunting. I mean, retention ponds normally, right, they're meant to hold water. Um, they're normally a large retention pond's 1 million gallons. Well, in 1 hour, you just filled up 30 retention ponds. And that was just 1 hour. That storm lasted, for 2 days. So it's just really hard to control. The DEC is doing some work to try to from satellites to try to help predict um, when HABs might be showing up through chlorophyll A, uh,
mm,
certain bandwidths of light that they can detect, as that starts growing, and that's an indicator of HABs. Um,
gotcha.
but it's
Because our the
extremely
HABs we have here. Oh, sorry, go on.
it's extremely complicated. I mean, up on the
Yes.
Great Lakes, you know, Lake Erie, I mean, they've invested a lot more money in research than they have in the Finger Lakes. And,
Mm,
they had a group that was working on making projections. Um, but that's right. Projections are just, hey, they're coming. It's not, what are we going to do about it? They're
mm,
going to come regardless. Um,
yeah.
there are, solutions for small ponds and things like that to help aerate them and do things. But, on the scale of Seneca, um, I mean, there's no solutions right now.
Yeah. I feel it's worth noting that the HABs that we do have are actually native bacteria that have been growing here for thousands, if not millions of years. It's just
Billions.
that certain conditions are letting them grow completely out of control. And this is also something that is not unique to Seneca Lake necessarily, or even New York State. Like HABs are a problem in China, Australia. across the globe, really. This is not, we have a unique set of the bacteria here in Seneca Lake, but it is not necessarily a problem that is unique to lake communities across the globe.
Yeah. If you read that book, The Devil's Element, I talked about on the one of the first slides, it goes into that in spades. You know, it talks about Lake Erie, it talks about Lake Okeechobee. Um, I mean, HABs are everywhere. And
Mm.
I forget what the percentage is, like 3% of the water on Earth is fresh water. I think somewhere in that range, I think. And I mean, HABs are everywhere.
Hmm.
That's fresh water.
Mm. We have another question from Anne. Can you comment on whether the heated water from Greenwich is increasing the HAB growth?
Um, it not lake wide for sure. Um, the amount of heat that comes in is quickly absorbed by the lake. It could have some local impact, um, down close to the power plant. But as far as uh, an energy source that, is causing lake-wide problems, that's not the case.
Another question. Will solar farms generate more phosphorus and runoff?
No, I don't believe so. Solar farms are not spreading manure. Solar farms are not spreading phosphorus. Um, so no, I don't believe that'll add
Okay.
any additional.
A question for me, actually. So you spoke a lot about the mussel situation and the growing idea that the mussel life cycle is one of the primary driving forces of phosphorus and therefore HABs. Um, what are some mussel solutions potentially that are out there? Are there any mussel solutions out there that might actually have some possibility in reducing their numbers?
None that I'm aware of, right? I mean, nobody's ever come up with a solution for uh, mussels in a lake this size. Uh,
I've heard the another invasive species in the lake, the goby, actually eats them.
it does. I've seen research that talk about uh, they won't be able to make a difference.
Okay,
I mean, I've seen some things kind of both ways, um, but I wouldn't rely on the Gobi to save the day.
gotcha. So, what do you think are the most actionable items, the things that we have control over the most of right now that we can do that'll have a positive benefit on this problem?
Reducing phosphorus. I mean, that. Like I said, that's the only controllable factor that we can do something about. And to do something about it, right, means we need communities, municipalities. We need to reduce um, the non-point source phosphorus. Like I said, the wastewater treatment plants are doing a pretty good job. Um, I mean, I go around, right, I'm measuring flow in 10 streams around the lake, taking phosphorus samples. Um, there are storms where the water is just chocolate brown. Um, a lot of a lot of soil, which phosphorus will attach to soil particles um, coming down the streams. So the key is to slow that water down. Uh, let the soil drop out of it. Um, Stop it before it gets into the stream. Right, the riparian buffers, around stream edges and or stream edges is probably the second most important BMP that could be done uh, on top of the AAM plan. And it's a hard thing, right? Because to do that, farmers have to take land out of production, and that affects their bottom line. So that's the tightrope, that needs to be walked. Um, there was a program a few years ago that was going to compensate farmers for it putting buffers in, but it didn't go anywhere because the farmers didn't feel they were being adequately compensated. So the solutions are there. It's just, is the will and the watershed there uh, to get these things implemented?
Gotcha. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do at Seneca Lake Pure Waters. We're trying to foster a sense of community and foster responsibility for maintaining the lake that 100,000 people depend on for drinking water. It's not just necessarily the properties around the lake itself. And the lake itself is the driving force for much of the local economy. So without the lake, property values will go down, taxes will go up, job opportunities will go down, your health will be impacted. So this is why we focus on things like that here, so that we can try and make a difference and benefit everyone.
Yep.
And I just want to, I think we're good unless anyone has any last second questions. Um, I just want to thank everyone here for attending. We are going to put this up on our YouTube and also on our website. So if you want someone else to check it out, please recommend to them to check it out. I would also say check out our website, senecalake.org. And if you're not a member, please become one. We do incredibly important work, and sometimes it's a struggle to find the money or the manpower. So, if you're willing to donate your time or energy or both, we would love to have you on board. Mark, thank you so much for giving this talk this evening. Our next deep dive is scheduled for July 23rd. We will be talking about the Seneca drums with Professor Jed Sparks of Cornell University.
Great job,
Thank you
Mark.
very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. It looks like we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to call it there. Thank you again, everyone, for attending.
Yeah.